think if everyone's settled in, I think we will begin our meeting. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. Just a reminder that this Heritage meeting is being live streamed to the city's website and that you must use the microphones to be heard. As always, members of the public are advised that individuals and the media may also be audibly or visually recording this meeting. I would also like to remind you that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during these committee meetings. So before we begin our meeting, I'd like to pass the announcements over to staff, and they'd like to make a couple of notes.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Yvette Rubensky. I attended before. Hopefully most of you know me. I was just going to announce that we've got Miranda Brenton starting with the planning department. She started yesterday, and she's our new cultural heritage planner. So she's joined us today. And our next meeting will also have David Addington join us as well. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Just to add to that, we also have some news regarding our existing cultural heritage planner. This meeting will be Jeremy's last meeting with us. So on behalf of the Heritage Committee, and I'm sure we'll have thank yous all afternoon, but thank you, Jeremy, for all the work that you've done. And it's very sad to see you go. But I don't know if you want to take a minute to say a few words.
Chair, thank you everyone for a great 2 years. It's been wonderful working with each and every one of you. I think we've accomplished a lot. I think we've done a lot of good work, and I'm sure we'll see each other in the future at some point.
Thank you, Jeremy. And welcome to Miranda. We're happy to have you on board as one of our staff representatives. So Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Under Communications, we have item 5.1, correspondence from Mark Giovedoni respecting the heritage designation of 374 Jerseyville Road in Ancaster. We have consent item 7.5, Policy and Design Working Group meeting notes of November 19th. 7.6, Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee minutes of November 20th. And 7.7, Inventory and Research Working Group meeting notes of November 26th.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Kathy, seconded by David. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, we'll move on to our approval of the meeting minutes from our previous meetings. On September 13th, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of September 13th? Wolf, seconded by Tim. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Under our correspondence items, we have an item from Mark Giovedoni respecting the heritage designation of 374 Jerseyville Road in Ancaster. So that item is in your yellow package, I believe. May I have a motion to receive this correspondence? Tim, seconded by Graham. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Moving on to our delegation requests. We have a delegation request before us today from Carol Priamo from the Beasley Neighborhood Association respecting a proposed heritage education package. What is the committee's wish? Would you wish for the Kathy to speak? Yeah, okay. We need a seconder? Chuck, yes, seconder. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So I'll ask Carol to come up to the front for her delegation. So they're speaking first, right? Carol's. Yes. Welcome, Carol.
Use this space here. Okay, yes, I have requested to present this Heritage Education Package project to the to the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. Actually, at the request of Councillor Farr. I can let you know how this happened very, very briefly, and that is that from this summer, we had some issues at the Beasley Neighborhood Association where some designs for heritage buildings were proposed, and there was it was obvious to us that the proposer, or say the owner, was not really aware of the guidelines, the city's guidelines for design guidelines for heritage in a character zone, even if it wasn't designated. So after that, and preceding that, a couple of other instances as well, where we found that heritage education, in terms of what the city puts out, what is available from the province, and various other sources, even the federal government has wonderful resources, that it would be good to collect these together. A lot of them are on the city website, as you know, but they are in separate places. I myself, when I started to research this after I proposed it to the BNA and they really liked the idea, I had a hard time finding them myself. Not that they're not in the right place. It's just that I guess I was looking for something that would tell you about anything you needed to know, whether you were a heritage property owner designated or listed, whether you were a developer or investor who wanted to, use heritage properties or demolish heritage properties or add to them or whatever. There's just all sorts of people, groups that really need this kind of resource in order to go ahead and to meet the city's objectives and goals for heritage conservation, which has really been stressed in the last downtown secondary plan. And I think that we really want to do the best we can to help with that being enacted and being used, recognized, whatever. So I actually thought that initially, up until like this week, that I was going to need a recommendation from the committee to council, so that council could review it. But actually, since it's going to be funded and it's been confirmed by Ward 2, the area rating reserve, what's that called? Area rating reserve fund? Yeah, something like that. And it's very close to that title, but I've asked Councillor Farr twice. I wanted to make sure that, first of all, he knew what I was doing, and I've gone over this with him at 2 meetings, and it's definitely confirmed. So with that, this really is a kind of it's an informational presentation, definitely, but I really am very keen, and so is the BNA, of course. I'm speaking for them. I'm the heritage coordinator on their board, so this is a BNA initiative, as I mentioned. I'm very keen to get your input and feedback, any questions that I can take and maybe answer later or answer now, depending on the time that we have, and have that involvement so that when I proceed on this and come to one of the stages or phases that I will need to go back to staff, I will need to go back to the BNA, Councillor Farr, but also to this committee. Very important that this committee review what is in that, what it looks like, how usable is it, and this will be probably, hopefully, a couple of meetings, couple of times, even if I'm just sort of emailing it through the chair, and you can look it over. It might not need to be an actual meeting, but I really, am very concerned to have that from you. Now, I did do a PowerPoint thinking that I would need recommendation to council, but, hopefully I will stop talking now and you can look at this. because it is a really sort of brief summary of everything. And I can tell you just the things that have changed, because I sent out 3 items. One was a kind of a summary of the project. The second one was the project development and background to this point. And the third one was the table of contents to this point. Now, in the meantime, I have talked to Alyssa Golden with Heritage Projects and Jeremy Parsons with Cultural Heritage Planning. And there have been some adjustments, additions, and a slightly different kind of look of the brochure. It was supposed to be, as you probably know, a kit. So I'll just show you a kit that's in a folder with all of the complete documents, which gets very heavy and very expensive to print. And then also there was yes, the Heritage Property Owners brochure that the staff was working on quite a while ago, and this is the draft here. Wasn't finished, and it has some information too that heritage owners would benefit them in doing any additions, restorations of their property, or what funds are available, and that sort of thing. So the package that I did was sort of guideline standards, and we're going to go now to that. So you can see, okay. You push this big one? Okay, sorry. Okay, so I've just got a very short list, again, not complete. I want to show you this because if you think of anybody else, and this will, of course, be very important in the absolute last, the distribution, phase. But it's also good to know who they are before, of course, you get the content nailed down. And I've got distributors on the bottom, and these are just ideas, and after I've done some preliminary research. Okay, so now we go to, oh, I see. I'm sorry. You have to have it on that little arrow. Okay. You think I've done this a lot of times, so you'd think that maybe, I would have it. But okay, now the format options, I talked about this originally because I'd like you to have sort of a visual idea of what form this might take. The kit folder with the fill documents, I presented this to city staff. I presented it to the Education and Communications Working Group, the Policy and Design Working Group, and I had feedback from that group, which was excellent. And that was perhaps we could have a little introduction to those particular content items, and then a link to where you can find the full document and perhaps some pictures or diagrams or maps that will illustrate that in this particular format. So then we went to, after seeing the content, which was a combination of the content sheet I gave you, sent to you, and some other things from that draft brochure, I was looking at an 8-page an 8-page booklet, and what I did was there wasn't anything in Heritage available because most of them are gone, but something like this that's done by the city, it has 8 pages and it could be double column. So I think that would be, in keeping with what is already given out by the city. And I do believe that you could get everything in there with pictures and diagrams and all sorts of photos to illustrate those items, or topics. And then the booklet will be printed, so it's like this, and it'll also be posted online. And then we go to the standards and guidelines. These are the contents, and I'm not going to stop at these because I already sent them out, and I'm just going through them because what I want to do is for the standards and guidelines. It was suggested actually by Alyssa that if you have a sample to show, the committee, you might get a better idea of how we're going to go through these various areas. So you got design guidelines for heritage character zones as a title. Then you've got a blurb. City of Hamilton guidelines, I won't read it. It's going to be an introduction, tells you what you're going to get in that, and, you know, and about the areas identified by the secondary plan, the official plan. And then this on the right is just a little visual and a caption. And then down here we have the link, which is really long. So that's the only thing I've come up against with the links, is that most of the links are great. You know, they're just one line long. Some of them are very like this. They have a lot of numbers in them, and because they're PDFs. So we'll see about that. That's not a big issue. Okay, then we go into inventory and designation. And again, in this area, the sample is, I hope I can remember how to do this. Yeah. The sample is this Heritage Resources Downtown map, which shows listed and designated buildings. And there's another map on heritage character zones in this area. I am concentrating mostly on downtown right now for this heritage package. The bits that are on the heritage property owners, say residences, could be, of course, outside of the downtown as well. But these are mostly like commercial, also neighborhoods that have residential architecture, public buildings especially, and again, it's really to educate people about the heritage in the downtown area, since it is really the most historic, and Beasley being, of course, one of the oldest neighborhoods. Okay, so that's the sort of thing you would see. And here's another sample for designated properties. It's just a little bit on, this is a new content item, which is plaques for designated properties that I think are a very good idea, but a lot of people don't even know about them. They don't even know that they exist. So, and if they do know, well, they'll be reminded. Okay, so funding heritage is another section of the content. I put them under main headings, although each of these points is a separate item. So financial incentives for designated heritage, and then there's property grant program for financial assistance for structural stability, etc., commercial property improvement program. These are all different, so they would be you know, separated out and explained in their introductory blurb and given a link. The project phases, I wanted to put this down because I wanted to let you know what is involved, and I'm sure most of you, or if not all of you, will know that this is kind of the way a project of this sort goes. It starts with research and collection of contents, and which is in this project, I have done this for at least 2 months, maybe 3. I've got so much research done, but I will have to continue the research as well, because I will be needing more illustration, photography, that sort of thing. And also there'll be the addition from the draft Heritage Owners brochure to fill in, because it's really brief. That's not a finalized content. So then there'll be consultation with users and supporters. By that I mean, before this goes any deeper, I would like to talk to restoration architects, or just people who do restoration who aren't restoration architects, or planners in the city, or, you know, developers who will talk, or who, you know, will give any feedback whatsoever. Just people who might be using it. And then naturally, when you get to the actual brochure, you want to do the writing and editing. And again, this will be with the collection of visuals, etc., and then a draft layout of this. Or even before the draft layout, there will be the content and the visuals, and that is when I would like again for the endorsers, the Heritage Committee staff, to review it again, and then a draft layout and a final layout, and then it will be printed and posted online. And I just want to mention right now is that from this meeting, even though it's an informational presentation, I know Councillor Farr is really keen to have the endorsement of the committee. In other words, we think it's a good idea, we like it. You know, and that's what he really would like. That's why I'm here at his, you know, at his request. So just to make that slight difference, so you know, that's what we'd like, the BNA and Councillor Farr, in order to fund this. He says he's going to fund it, but I think he'd be a lot happier if the Heritage Committee was on side. Thank you. That's it, unless I don't think I have any more. No, I see I don't have any more.
Last
End of
slide?
slideshow. Okay, well, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Carol. Do we have any questions for our presenter? Or any comments? Kathy? Maybe I should make that announcement. Anyone that has their microphone, please make sure they're turned on. Yeah. Oh. Oh. No, there should be a light on.
Sorry, yeah, out of practice. Yeah, so just saying what a great idea it is, and a couple of specific questions. I know that, of course, your heart is in Beasley, and why wouldn't it be? But thinking that this, of course, has much wider relevance, and will your brochure, let me frame it as a question, will your brochure be Beasley specific, or will it be a list of essentially a pulling together of resources that can be applicable to any area of the city?
Yeah, it initially began as a Beasley initiative, and because it was a kit, we're going to insert maps and various other things that had to do with Beasley and the area. But now that it's not going to be that kind of kit with full documents, it's going to not be specific to Beasley, but it likely will be specific to downtown, just because I'll see. I'm not quite sure yet. I really have to sort of consult with Councillor Farr to see if we're going to go any further than the downtown core. But anybody, it's for the general public too. Anybody can pick it up, and it will be relevant to heritage, you know, on the mountain as well. It doesn't say, you know, it's just for this particular area.
Just thank you, Carol. That, yeah, as an inveterate mountaineer, of course, I want to be sure that it's going to have wider application. And my follow-up question, I get the impression that with all of your skills, art skills, design skills, research skills, that you're essentially in consultation with us and with planning and with all of the other stakeholders, that you're going to push this through. Because it was a little discouraging to hear that the city had our staff had started something with no aspersions being cast. I know how busy they are, but with 2 new people coming in, there's not going to be a lot of extra time, I suspect, at this side of the resource balance. So do I understand correctly that you're going to be pushing this through?
Yes, and I've done this type of project before many times for government, producing these booklets and publications that are educational or promotional. So yeah, that's one way that it will be assured it will get done.
Are there any other questions or comments? None? So may I have a motion to receive the presentation? Kathy, seconded by Tim. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So now it's up to the committee if we'd like to put forward a recommendation to council or a comment in regards to support of the project as a valuable project for heritage in the community. If we'd like to offer our resources as volunteers, the working groups, anytime consultations needed. So it's up to the committee if you'd like to go and make any further statements.
We should definitely follow up on it. It's definitely a good idea. Remove the limitations of location, so that it should actually just say citywide. It's city funds, it's citywide. And maybe concentrate the downtown core, because there is more heritage down here, but not say anywhere in it, this is for the downtown.
Right.
Make it for the whole city.
Exactly.
That's the only thing I can see be useful.
Yes.
And of course, we're all here to help.
Yeah, that I know we'd appreciate that very much. That's what I do need. I mean, I can do a brochure, but it's the feedback, the input, the questions, what you catch, what I didn't catch. That is what's really, really essential to us doing this. So we really appreciate that opportunity to, just to interface with you throughout maybe a couple of times. Okay, that would be great.
So Lorraine, just a statement in our minutes saying that there was positive feedback. Is that enough for council, or do?
Oh,
Do you
that
need
would be great.
any further recommendations? Okay. So may I have someone for that motion? Yep. Oh.
Just wondering if there's merit in referring the presentation to the various subcommittees for their information as well, because not all the members of the subcommittees are on this committee, so they may find it as a useful resource tool as well.
So we will make that amendment to the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to do that too, and actually I've already spoken to two members of the Communications and Education, and also two, but I know there are other committees that, need to be informed of this in more detail than just it's happening. Yeah, okay, good.
So, David?
Prior to the motion, I just want to congratulate you as well on the type of work that you've done. I know how much work goes into these type of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've certainly done a lot of work, and it is appreciated by all the members of, certainly of this committee and the others as well. It is terrific when information is pulled together. That is what is often the problem, is we have a lot of information out there, but to find it here, there, and everywhere is often difficult. So congratulations on your good work.
Oh, thanks a lot. Really.
Nice. Chuck?
So can I ask a question of staff? Carol held up kind of a brochure for the development process, and I know there's similar ones out there, like for property standards as an example. It's almost embarrassing to say this. I don't know of one that's similar for heritage, or is there one? And if not, then it would seem like a worthwhile task to do regardless, with a lot of the same initiative. And, some of the things that Carol's, highlighted, some of the detailed stuff, like big long links and named links, those could be addressed, and they have been obviously in other forms with publisher. But to design a brochure like that, it's distilling a lot of information, making it graphical, and it would seem to me to be a worthwhile initiative for the Heritage Committee to do, if not in conjunction or otherwise. So again, my question is, don't we have a similar brochure for heritage to what similar to what Carol held up there for the development process? And I don't remember it.
Yeah, through the chair to you, Chuck. It's a good point. We do have a number of brochures. So we have a brochure for heritage designation. We have a brochure for heritage permits. We have handouts and guidelines for impact assessments. So we have a number of things. They're not congregated in one place. I mean, they're all on our website. But I think Carol's intention is sort of to bring it all in one place and to sort of advise property owners and people who are inquiring about heritage to kind of go to one place. So we had a meeting, we spoke with Alyssa Golden about it as well, and I think the intention sort of would be that it would be consistent with all of our other publications. So certainly, it's the direction from the councillor. We could get Heritage Committee, if Heritage Committee is behind it, then the intention would be that it would sort of be of the same kind of production with our design staff of all of our other brochures. And that's the intention, at least. And I think Carol's sort of deciding which way she wants to go on that, but I think that I'm sure the city would support it, and I'm sure it would be a useful resource for a lot of our property owners as well.
Are there any? Oh, I think Ron wants to.
A couple of things. I like the notion that we're designing something with the client or customer in mind rather than the city putting something out. Like when you talked about, we have something for designation, we have something for impact. That's somewhat designed with our needs in mind. This sounds like it's very much designed with the needs of the customer, the taxpayer, the homeowner. One of the concerns I have, being a chair of a working group and asking to endorse something, I don't know what I'm endorsing. I understand the process you're coming up with and what work you're going to do, but I still don't know what I'm endorsing.
Right.
I'm endorsing work.
Yeah, it's
Council.
really, I think the concept of it. And, yeah, and I guess the belief that it can be accomplished. But it is mostly to endorse a concept, because I don't even have it to a point where you would look at it and say, okay, I see what this is going to look like, so no. I think if you put it that way, endorse a concept.
Okay. Because all of our working groups have projects that are in the midst of being completed or launched. And I have to have a sense of what the priority is going to be and how this particular project affects other projects that we're involved in.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's something that needs to be looked into for me.
Yeah, and I think,
because I don't know what those are.
and I think that's a discussion we need to have, given this point in time, where there's going to be some change in this group composition with a new term of council, and inevitably there's going to be changes that take place in the working groups as well. So I think that's a conversation we have to figure out in how we incorporate this particular project. The last thing, if this is going to be a directory in some ways to different pieces of information that currently exist, I would, maybe it was there and I just missed it, but I didn't hear any consultation step with the people who manage the website for the city.
Oh, no, there definitely would be them. I wouldn't be doing that. They would figure out how to put it, and it would be in one place. It wouldn't, again, be.
I guess I would like to see them involved in the project very much like this group is, because coming along, they have a whole list of project priorities as well. And coming along with, okay, here it is, you run the risk that it isn't being done in a way that's compatible with how they do their work. And secondly, they're getting a surprise, here's a fait accompli, okay, how do I order this with all the other priorities we have?
That's a really good point, to do that sooner than later. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. They're one of the people, or one of the groups to consult,
Yes.
Along with communications, who they do this sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And then the working groups and, you know. Okay, so thanks for that point, because you're right, I did not make a point of that.
Okay.
Kathy?
So my comments are similar to Ron's. I'm not exactly sure, and as a chair of a working group as well, exactly what we're endorsing or what have you. I think it's a fantastic idea. But what I would also like to say, based on my experience either professionally or even as a volunteer, city staff do provide they'll line up the pieces and connect the dots for people. And I know that, you know, they've been very helpful with knowing what information that they have and what's available in the particular instance, because what's for somebody that maybe needs to do their masonry or repair a porch is quite different than somebody that's going to build a 30-story building. So obviously there's that. So I think what I would be a little bit concerned about is, you know, what the overlap is with the staff in there and the many different departments that might be involved, whether it be planning, you know, it could be traffic, it could be whoever. There's all, you know, building department, and just make sure that everybody's sort of on the same page so that the people are getting the same information. And another thing, based on my experience, again, and some of my working experience, is sometimes people come and they say that, you know, they didn't get the information from the city, and then, you know, I might look through the file and what have you, and quite a few times what it is they didn't get what they wanted to hear from the city. So it's not necessarily they didn't get the information, they maybe just didn't get that, you know, that's what the property might be zoned for, or something like that. So I think there's a long way to go on the education committee, policy and design, and what have you. But I think it's fantastic for sure, and to have that kind of civic engagement, bringing this forward is just wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that there's just much more to it as you get into it, and different levels of using it, and yeah, that is something that you know, that I'll need to address with staff in various departments, for sure. But I guess I need to really begin to kind of just get the approach and some of those summaries down, and then that still won't be sort of a finished kind of, you know, well, not a concept, but a finished product. It will just be a step that needs to be done, you know, and I think that's a good place to start. That's where I'm actually starting, is that, but I'm also starting with consulting after the new year with these various groups and people and staff and, you know, departments of the city and some users, like talking to realtors and talking to, like I said, you know, heritage restoration people that I know. So it would be good just to talk to them and see, well, would they use this, and would it be helpful to them in finding these things when they're doing, you know, their job, their project, their proposal, whatever. So I think the next thing for me, besides those summaries, is to get a list of all of those places and people. Like I said, a more comprehensive list, and it's now bigger now that I've been here today. So I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that, and then I can get it, you know, whichever way I have to go, whatever process I have to go through to have you see it, you know, without it being another big meeting yet, or something like that. Yeah, those things are sort of important to pass on as soon as they're, you know, I sort of exhausted all the possibilities for myself, I mean for me, then we'll see what's missing. So is that what you got in there, Kathy? Is that something like that? Yeah, I can understand your concern totally about that, you know, overlapping of different users, and will it be meeting their needs? Mm-hmm.
Okay. And just to clarify, so the motion that we're putting forward, our comment doesn't use the word endorse, but support. We support the project and the initiative.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
support would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a nice word.
I think we have to clarify, not financially, but with resources,
yes,
volunteer resources.
Yeah.
So Kathy put forward the motion. We need a seconder. Tim, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay. Thank you
Great.
very much again for all that hard work you're putting into it.
Thanks,
Really do
Elizabeth.
appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Lauren.
So our next item is item 7.1 under consent items. This is our inventory and research working group meeting notes of September 24th. So you have those in your package. If there's no questions for the chair, may I have a motion to receive the meeting notes? Tim, seconded by David. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 7.2 is our inventory and research working group meeting notes of October 29th. If we can turn to those, there are some recommendations. So the inventory and research working group recommends the following to the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. Number one is our Ferguson Station pumping station that inventory research working group, based on the cultural heritage assessment provided, recommends to the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee that the Ferguson pumping station at 231 Ferguson Avenue, Hamilton, Ontario, be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and further be added to staff's work plan. The second recommendation is for Jimmy Thompson Pool, and the inventory and research working group, based on the cultural heritage assessment provided, recommends to the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee that the Jimmy Thompson Pool at 1099 King Street East in Hamilton, Ontario, be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and further to be added to the staff's work plan. So those are the two recommendations. Are there any questions of the working group chair or to staff? Chairman?
Through you, Madam Chair. If I could just clarify, so these two properties were reviewed by the Inventory and Research Working Group. I put forward to them these two properties because we put out the consultant report for both these properties, which are already on our designation work plan. But staff still have to bring forward the report for these properties, and the consultant will likely want to be here as well. So before the motion goes forward to actually designate the property, I think it'd be important to have the information there and to have the consultant as well. So I think that's just a clarification there. Through the chair, it shouldn't be long, and it certainly I think would have been great to have it for this meeting, but maybe subsequent meetings, January or February. I'm sure because the work has already been done for these, so it's just a matter of bringing it forward, getting it reviewed by our staff as well. But there weren't any glaring issues that were brought forward by the working group, so I think that it's a pretty straightforward designation report.
So I have to use the mic as well. For 7.2, I would recommend receiving the inventory group notes, which means that no action will be taken, but a note can be made about the staff report coming back to a future heritage meeting.
So may I have someone to put forward that motion? Graham, seconded by Tim. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 7.3 is our policy and design working group meeting notes of November 19th. May I have unless there's any questions for Kathy, may I have a motion to receive the meeting notes? Wolf, seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 7.4 is the Hamilton Community Heritage Fund Loan Program for 31 to 33 Melville Street in Dundas. This report has been forwarded to the committee for our information. Are there any questions of committee members? May I have a motion to receive the report? Kathy, seconded by Wolf. All in favor? Any opposed? Item 7.5 is in your yellow package. Is for the Policy and Design Working Group meeting notes of November 19th. There's no recommendations. May I just have a motion to receive those notes? Chuck, seconded by Wolf. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 7.6 is a Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee minutes of November 20th. Are there any questions in regards to those notes for 7.6? Wolf, is there any points to note for may I have a motion to receive the meeting notes for that working group? Wolf, seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 7.7 is our inventory and research working group meeting notes of November 26th. Is there any notes or indication? May I have a motion to receive the meeting notes under item 7.7? Tim, seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So we now fall onto our general information. We have our list of buildings and landscapes. Does anyone have any properties that they'd like to report on? Kathy?
Just a quick update on Century Manor. I copied the correspondence to Jeremy, but Mohawk College is going gangbusters with its, they're calling it really a non-expansion, but everybody knows that it's an expansion. But anyway, they really are going out of their way to do community consultation. And unfortunately, I wasn't available for the last consultation they had a few weeks ago, so followed up with some correspondence about the position of Century Manor, which, as you will recall, Mohawk College was supposed to be purchasing through the city in some kind of a land swap. It was a very good deal from a heritage perspective, and I think from the city's perspective, also from the college's perspective, it really was win-win. But unfortunately, our new premier, in his wisdom, has decided that this deal will not be followed through. So this gave all of us who are interested in heritage, which is everybody here, some serious concerns. Apparently, and again, I was in correspondence not with one of the upper level administrators, but with somebody involved with the project who says that Mohawk College is still very keen to incorporate Century Manor in its planning going forward, and will be, as they have already undertaken, respective of its heritage features, and still plan, I think, to engage in restoration should the legalities be sorted out. So it's not exactly good news, but it's not bad news either.
Thank you, Kathy. Ron?
Just a question for staff. Is the city taking any action with respect to this, like a letter to the premier or to the appropriate ministry?
Through the chair, not that I'm aware of in terms of any letters or anything like that. The property does have heritage protection, so it is designated under Part 4. And all of our discussions with the property owner and their consultants, they've always maintained that their intention is to retain Century Manor. So we've never been advised otherwise. And they're still going through their visioning process for the redevelopment. But certainly heritage is a focal point. And they've also kind of made it clear that they intend to look at all the landscape features that are on the property as well, because there's more buildings and features than simply Century Manor. And we've clarified and made it clear to them that we would require impact assessment for any demolition on the property. So they've been fully aware and fully on board with that as well.
Thank you. Are there any other reports that anyone would like to make? Tim?
All right, this through the chair, a small one here for Treble Hall. They had a large open house for many of their suites that went by. I did send an invite to go see it, but I wasn't able to actually attend the event. But from the online pictures and things, it looks like it's going to be quite an interesting interior, where they're bringing back some of the lamps from the pagoda that had been in the restaurant. If people remember the old pagoda restaurant there, those will be incorporated in some of the units. And so it's an interesting mixture of things for condo rentals there, that you can purchase them. I'm not here to sell the condos, just that's a small part of it. And I've heard a rumor that Jimmy Thompson Pool was going to be designated. I heard that recently.
Way to stay right on top of things, too. That's not his style, Graham. He wanted to sneak in with the construction crew. Are there any other reports for properties? Yep. So what we'll do, if anyone has a report for properties, just raise your hand and go to the microphone. The other item too is if there's any properties on the list that anyone feels right now is a time to clean up our list for the end of the year that we should remove, or if there's any properties we need to add, looking forward to the new year, we can also make those comments now. So David, did you want to go first?
Yes, I do have a report on the Dunnington Grub Gardens at Gage Park. The Friends of Gage Park requested a meeting with the mayor's office concerning the firefighter project. And we did have a meeting with the mayor about a week ago. And we had some questions for the mayor's office, since there wasn't any sort of public meeting held on this monument and the changes to the park. But just before I think I get to those, it is important to know that the Friends had been working on this Dunnington Grub Foundation and bringing it to Hamilton for quite some period of time, and we spent considerable time and money on doing so. But how we sold this to the foundation was that our intention is to run, there were 3 programs involved, and one is to run a school program from grades 1 to 8 to inform all the students of, or to give information for the students from all aspects of horticulture, and this was going to be naming all the plants, trees, shrubs, flowers, also the pollinators, the birds. This was going to be a whole nature project for the public schools. The high school program that we had in place, or we were putting in place, and we have in place now actually, is to develop a program with the high schools itself, and especially our new high school that will be going in at the Scott Park location. And that would be a design and horticultural program, and it was going to be connected through one of our members to Guelph University, who has the big design and horticultural school there. And it would give students in an inner city an option to know that these are this is something that is available for a career opportunity. And of course we have our terrific greenhouses and everything that that can be utilized there, as well as bringing in these as part of the project. The third aspect, excuse me, of this was going to be a tourism project, and this was going to be part of what the Dunnington Grub Foundation was going to be noted for, and that would be to link all the Dunnington Grub sites across the province and provide the information on all these sites, and we had already had spoken to one tour operator to run a bus tour showcasing Hamilton's gardens other than the RBG, although that can be linked to the RBG as well, but to showcase Hamilton Gardens. So this was what the program was going to be about. And we were, being the Friends of Gage Park, were going to use the foundation as its funding base. Now, when this project came about, the foundation pulled back from, although we had, you can see the letter online, the foundation was just about to transfer or merge with our organization, and they pulled back on this. And the reason was, in other locations, we're not talking a firefighter monument, but we're talking a firefighter monument, a paramedic monument, a police association monument. When these types of monuments come out, all the other first responders want to have their monument as well. And they used, as an example, Ottawa, which has completed their firefighter monument, and now the paramedics are raising money for their monument because they don't want to be outdone by the firefighters. But the other thing is, too, here, is that there, and I think it's well known in the community that there is animosity between these two organizations. And place, and the city funding a separate monument for the firefighters would only cause more animosity between these two groups. And especially what has to be looked at is the city is, unlike other cities, this city was looking at funding this monument, and it's up there about $1 million, so this is not a small monument. And so we're not looking at $1 million project, we're looking at a $3 million project, because everyone is going to want not only their money, but they're going to want their place in the park. And that is what upset the Dunnington Grub Foundation. They said, we're turning this into a monument park, and the whole nature and use of the park will change, and the history of the park will be lost. So this is why they pulled their agreement at this moment. They said, well, you can have some time to see if you can work this out with the city. So this is why the Friends of the Gage Park had a meeting with the mayor's office, and we had 3 questions. One of them actually involved this committee, but the main question was, there is a master plan for the park, and even though staff had undertaken about a 1.5 year project, no contact was made with the community or our organization. So we were concerned that backroom meetings had been held and the public wasn't notified. The other situation is that a resolution had been passed at one time that civic monuments were to go in the forecourt of City Hall, and the forecourt wasn't included in the staff's report. And the other had to do with this committee, really, and I got to ask this question, was in the event that, in the case that the park is designated and it was recognized in the master plan that it was a cultural heritage site, and heritage staff had also set out to designate the park many years ago, which hasn't taken place. It was looked at being designated this year in the 100th anniversary of the park, but Chelsea has left the course, so that didn't follow through. Our question is why, if this was a culture recognized by the city and as a cultural heritage site, why didn't it come through this committee to at least be discussed? And so these were the questions I had, or that I proposed on behalf of the Friends of the Park. And we got quite a different answer than I expected. It boiled down to that what came out of the meeting was that the city didn't have a responsibility to notify the community that it was a city park, and that they didn't, and also the project was a city project, and the forecourt of City Hall was also part of the city's park or site project, and they didn't have to abide by the regulations that had been set out for the forecourt of City Hall, and they didn't have to recognize the master plan or really contact the people who were involved in the master plan, only give them notice of what the decision was made by City Council, or by the city report, and passed by the committee, and eventually passed by Council, I should say, as well. And that there weren't any secret backroom meetings, there were just meetings that the public wasn't invited to. The other, this was very disturbing, of course, and this committee or heritage planning being part of the City Council, there wasn't any need to bring it through this committee as well. So this kind of left us in a situation where we have all this great work that we have done, which was not going to cost taxpayers any money, but the project of the city is to spend about $1 million of taxpayers' money. And in the report, it's clear that the reason for Gage Park being chosen is that once a year there would be a day where the firefighter equipment would be displayed on Main Street for their day to respect their fallen firefighters. But so we have these two situations where we have all these educational programs and a tourist program, but which are non-taxpayer funded, and then we have this one taxpayer-funded program, which we think our program is a little better, but the mayor doesn't seem to think so. Actually, I believe today the budget is coming down for the city, or it's going to be implemented, or at least the councillors will have a first look at it today. And so what the Friends of the Park has decided is that they will have their legal counsel send a letter to the city asking that the funding line for the firefighters monument be tabled until a stakeholder meeting is held, and this is pending further legal action by the Friends of the Park. It is unfortunate it has got this far, because we're now having to use money that we would use for our children education fund and for legal counsel. But if the firefighter monument goes ahead, we won't have a funding model for the Friends of the Park, so we'll have to dissolve after 26 years, and all our programs will go with it, including Winterfest and the rest. So it's a very unfortunate situation that there hasn't been involvement and stakeholder meetings allowed on this project. So that is my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, David. I see lots of looks.
Okay, I'll say it. I can't believe this was a meeting with the mayor. After reading in the Glanbrook Gazette the text of the mayor's speech when we were all around being inducted into our new roles as councilors, I didn't count the number of times accountability, transparency was used in that speech. But I can't believe someone would say what you just reported here a matter of days after delivering that speech. As a taxpayer, I'm offended that we're going to be spending any money on a monument in a park when we have a forecourt. It doesn't, whether we are committed to it by previous councils or not, it's an ideal location. There's already a laborer's monument. Is that offensive to professional firefighters, police, and paramedics, that they have a monument in the same place as laborers in this city? Is it not on King Street? Same one-way street where Gage Park is? So we're going to have to fire. Where do we park the fire trucks? I can't believe this. As a taxpayer, taxpayers' money is going to be invested in this when a much more reasonable, sensible, cost-effective solution to where the monuments could be placed is right there outside in the Bob Morrow forecourt. Sorry.
Graham?
Also, directly across from number 1 station, we're building a new park. Why wouldn't the monument be incorporated into the new park that they're building directly across from the fire hall, where the fire trucks already are parked?
And it really is to weep to hear this account, and it's surprising as somebody who's always found the mayor to be rational and responsive, and it's too late to take my vote back. But I'm wondering whether, as a committee, since we've already this afternoon expressed our support for a scheme without any kind of financial investment, but just a kind of moral support for Carol's wonderful ideas, whether would it help, David? Is there something that we as a committee can place on record, or a recommendation that we can frame that might be of any assistance?
Yes, through the chair. To me, the park is a very historic place. To understand, I think, first of all, Laurie Dunnington was the first female landscape architect in Canada. And I think there's so much history here that what I can see it just being eroded away, monument after monument. And this is what I think we have been able to hold back for the last 25 years was any change to the, especially to the formal gardens, really to any part of the park, of any permanent structure. There's been one temporary use put into the park in the very far south end, but that can be undone in no time. But there's been no permanent structure in the park, and so I think if we could, say something along the line that the following past practices, that we maintain the park as a historical site, as a Victorian garden, passive Victorian garden, and I think that would be certainly a help to us.
And if I could add to that we take the foundation's proposal and advance with that. It's not just status quo. There are educational programs targeted to different groups of people, particularly school-age children in high school and elementary, in a community that you don't have much dedicated parkland. Okay? And it would seem to me that that's a worthy thing to pursue as well from a heritage point of view.
Lorraine has just put you on the spot to write that all down, David. We're all going to stare at you while you write it. Well, based on the general sentiment of the comments that have been had, can we maybe say that we'll work post-meeting, we'll work on the actual wording, but the intent is to show support of the initiatives of the Friends of Gage and the foundation. And those projects that relate to the broader community for school-age children and various projects that were intended. So, David?
I could just say one thing about the foundation. They were quite upset about this, of course, and they, in the letter to City Council, they did mention that that if the city didn't recognize its history, there were other cities that would. So I think it was pretty definite on. When in the meeting with the mayor, he said that he could speak with the foundation if we wish, but I think that wouldn't maybe be a good idea at this point.
So we need someone to put, Chuck, did you have a?
Sorry, maybe it's just a question of process. So why can't we put together a 1 or 2 sentence motion today and vote on it as a committee? I'd rather do that because this might be our last meeting, right, as this committee, right? May or may not. But
Oh no, we need your resources for another 2 months, at least.
Okay, well, be that as it may. Okay, forget that.
No, but no. If everyone's okay with sitting here for a couple minutes and coming up with the wording, I would rather do that.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, I would rather do that.
I don't think it's that hard. It's hopefully just a couple of sentences, and it should go in our minutes. I hope it'll go in our minutes. And if the Friends of Gage Park want to use it in their other initiative, that's to me that's worthy, right? So. Well, I mean, if the motions, the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee recommends that Gore Park, Gage Park remain principally as a I think it was passive Victorian park, and be utilized for principally for education. Sorry.
So that's an historic Victorian or passive
Victorian park.
Victorian park.
Period. Maybe period. The committee also recommends that the park continue to be used for educational purposes. What was the other one?
And and that we support the initiatives of the
And we,
Gage Park Foundation,
yeah,
or the
basically we
intended.
that's right, be principally, and the park being used for educational purposes, and we support the initiatives.
Can we include a line in there with the preservation of the formal garden, this building road? The Dunnington Grove formal garden, if we preserve that.
Please use the mics.
Thinking out loud. And include a line along the lines of we recommend the preservation intact of the Dunnington Grub gardens, formal gardens.
Ron, does that address your comments?
I think it does, but I just, what does principally mean? I don't want to get too confusing for people who might have to read this motion. Want to be transparent, don't want to create any words that might be misinterpreted.
So
What
you
is
had- so you
principally?
had-
I don't,
Yeah.
I am being facetious, I'm sorry, but I need to know what that word means.
Yeah, do you want to just read that, Lorraine?
The Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee recommends that Gage Park remain principally as a historic passive Victorian park, is the first phrase that I have.
So maybe we don't need principally
No.
in there. Yeah,
I think you're right.
that remain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
remain.
sorry.
Yeah. No, that's better.
I'm just angry, so please,
That's fine.
Many years of Heritage Committee have.
And is there, we're composing on the fly here. If it's that simple, it's just that one sentence, I'm okay with that. But I mean, if there's a second sentence, or you
I
continue.
have more.
Okay.
We were dealing with principally, so I dealt
Sure.
with principally. That the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee recommends that the park continue to be used for educational purposes, and this is where it gets a bit not quite well formed. That we support initiatives. That kind of trailed off. So some kind of initiatives, and then also preservation of the Dunnington Grub Gardens.
So the proposed initiatives of the Gage Park Foundation, is that correct? And
I hate to throw a rock into the pool. My concern is that we're trying to structure a motion here based on a verbal report that has no precedence to the agenda. And we're struggling with wording the motion. My preference would be that we receive a written report at our next meeting with a recommended motion that has some foundation, some history to a motion. I think this motion can be pretty strong and dangerous because there's no precedent. There's no foundation to why was this motion initiated. Just a thought.
Wolf is correct. And David, is there any urgency of waiting for the month for the motion?
We would have to get our information in from our legal counsel because the budget is coming, will come down and be approved probably by the end of January.
What we're talking about here is separate from anything that you're doing in that regards. This is just simply a record to council that we support Gage Park
and maybe possibly it could just be a statement, a general statement as such that it supports the initiative of the Friends of Gage Park, something along that line. It doesn't have to be a particular specific motion as to maintaining the gardens or whatever. It could be some just general statement so that at least there's some statement made that there's an understanding of what is happening at the park.
Kathy?
Well, I respect our elder statesman at the end of the table. I honestly don't think this committee should be scared off. We have a case here of the proposed desecration of a heritage, an important heritage resource in this city, with all sorts of sociological and educational implications for the children in our city, and this is a city which proclaims itself the best place to raise a child. Let's not back off. Let's make sure that we have a motion.
And I think it would be fair to preface the motion maybe that it's based on the verbal updates from the representative in regards to that property.
And I do want to say from our understanding of what come out of the meeting, because you sometimes, there's other interpretations, but from what we came out of the meeting is what, and the mayor did reiterate at least 3 times that the council could do what they wanted. So I think it was fairly direct on what he had said. But to be fair, you have to make sure that we understood what came out of the meeting and what was said.
Chuck?
Could I just, I'm going to ask a question of David now, and it's in deference to what Wolf's saying. I think I agree with him on point of principle, but the question's for David here. Is there a formal proposal to build these monuments? So I guess my question is, if the mayor's doing this in a non-formal process, then why can't we, right? Why can't we as a committee, right, choose the same path? So, I'm sure there's notions and ideas that have been tossed around, but, it sounds like it's being designed on the fly, right? So my question is there a formal proposal for the monument plans at Gage Park?
Through the chair, there was a formal proposal made by staff, which did go to committee, but there were no stakeholder meetings involved with that proposal, and the committee, which would be the Public Works Committee, approved the plan, and council also approved the plan. So it's there in place, but that doesn't mean that it has to be funded or can be carried through under a new council. But our certain concern in this being involved for so many years is that there has always been a stakeholder meeting and all the issues brought forward, which we have brought forward, and they haven't been discussed. And that is, I think, what has been really the crux of the problem here is no real formal consultation.
Thanks.
Ron, did you have that?
Yeah, it's another observation. I thought our discussion about this is concluding. It's just that we have a duplication in the list of properties. Yeah.
Just noticed that myself.
That it obviously shouldn't be in the yellow category. It should be in the black category, right?
It's in both red and...
Or excuse me, red. Excuse me. It should be in the red. I'm tone of this.
It's in red and yellow.
Okay. And not to beat this thing up about children, but isn't this the site of the Children's Museum? Sorry. I just wanted to make that.
Tim?
Just through the chair, one more question. I guess from the junior statesman this time after Will spoke there. So if I have misunderstood maybe some of the roles of the committee, I'm just wondering, like this motion versus like us actually making a motion asking for designation of the park would be, like I've often seen us, recommend designation or not, or hear things come forward whether we will or not. Whereas it does seem that I agree with Wilf somewhat that it is a little nebulous, this motion versus, a clear direction. And also a follow-up to the chair, has any parks ever been designated or landscapes of this size? I know we talked about therapeutic landscapes and we talked about the Gore as a district.
Gage is on the work plan, isn't it? Yeah. No, that's right. No. What year are we sitting at?
To the chair. It is on the work plan. It's sort of staff's selected the roster for the next round of designations, and we had selected one firm to be scoped to do specifically landscape work with the idea of Gore Park, Gage Park in mind, because these are big properties that are complicated figuring out how you're going to designate it. But it certainly is on the work plan, and the intention is to designate the property. Also to David's points, this was Chelsea's file, so I sort of inherited it. But I remember Chelsea was away one day, and so she asked me to attend the Public Works Committee meeting where this was discussed. So I remember taking notes, and I distinctly remember part of the recommendation from the councillors was that further consultation take place with the Friends of Gage Park. So there was that direction, and my understanding was that Public Works staff had begun that engagement, but I wasn't involved to the level that they were, and certainly you were. But that was my, recollection.
And I would suggest maybe if we're forming a recommendation that form part of it as well, just reiterating that engagement with the Friends of Gage Park continue. Do you need to read all that out one more time?
Madam Chair, should we then not say it's on the staff work plan for designation?
Yes.
In this?
So in the preface, based on comments and seeing as it is currently on staff's work plan for designation, that Municipal Heritage Committee recommend the following.
Based on a verbal update from a member of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee, the HMHC recommends that the Gage Park remain as a historic passive Victorian park, that the park continue to be used for educational purposes, that the HMHC support the proposed initiatives of the Friends of Gage Park and the Foundation, that preservation of the Dunnington Grove Gardens continue. I don't have a full note on that. And that engagement with the Friends of Gage Park and the Foundation continues.
So that was the Dunnington Grove Foundation, rather than just the park.
Yeah. I was going to get back to that.
And then, as part of the introduction, it's based on the verbal update.
Oh, pardon
and
me. I missed my own writing, yes. And seeing as it is on staff's
work plan for
work plan.
designation.
I can't read my own writing. Yes.
I just had to agree the preservation of the gardens intact, because the monument's slated to rip part of the gardens out.
David, you said that it was the three projects. One was education, one was tourism, and
Yes, there were two education programs, one for what would be public school 1 to 8, and then the high school program through the University of Guelph, Guelph University,
So,
horticulture. And
so youth, yeah. So youth programs.
Youth programs. I'm saying we're youth programs.
Post-secondary education programs, and potential for tourism or tourism programs.
I'm sorry to take so much time in the committee here.
Okay. One more time.
Let's see if I can make a better go of it. Based on verbal updates from a member of the HMHC, and seeing as the property is on staff's current work plan, the HMHC recommends that Gage Park remain as a historic passive Victorian park, that that the park continue to be used for educational purposes, youth programs, post-secondary, and a potential for tourism programs, that the HMHC support the proposed initiatives of the Friends of Gage Park and the Dunnington Grove Foundation, that the preservation of the Dunnington Grub Gardens remain intact, and that the HMHC continue their engagement with Friends of Gage Park and the Dunnington Grub Foundation.
The city staff continue engagement with. Okay. Any other changes that work plan for designation, if you want to up at top, staff's work plan?
If there's any legal action going on with the city relating to this matter, it might be better that this all just be served as a notice of motion and be referred to the city solicitor, because I'm reluctant for this committee to be making recommendations or to planning committee to council that may or may not have legal ramifications. We were trying to, I know we earlier had correspondence going back and forth with the city solicitor's office, but we just can't find their advice at this point in time. And I'd just be very cautious how we proceed. Also, given the fact what is in the park, because I know we have the greenhouses, they have the mum show, there's some other, they have the BMX bike park. So if you were looking at a true Victorian park, you probably wouldn't allow some of those organic changes that have happened in Gage Park over the last few years. So parks are dynamic places, and I think we're dealing with a very specific issue that's surrounded by legal issue. So I'm now it's getting into that area where I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable, and it can stay as a notice of motion, but I would suggest that before this committee take any action, that the clerk consult with the city solicitor, and that we come back and report at the January meeting on how to proceed. The notice will be there, and at least it sends a strong signal as a notice of motion, but until such time as the city solicitor has had a chance to, and the city clerk has had a chance to look at this further, as well as to consult with the Parks Department as to what would this motion mean in terms of just the natural organic changes that occur in parks over time. I would hate for us to be this committee to be sending the wrong message or have some sort of unintended consequences. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head of the pump track that they put in last year or the year before, and I know pump track serves a big component of the community because there's been a lot of issues because that sort of serves as something that a lot of residents in that part of the city would not normally have access to. And the group that did develop that pump track last year, they were quite proud of what they did. But 100 years ago, you never would have contemplated a mountain bike track in a park. So if it's okay with the committee, I think just as a notice of motion, and it's up to the committee, obviously, but that would be my advice at this point in time.
Is that a fair recommendation? It's up to the committee.
I would ask you to use the mics, please. We're having a lot of conversations today about transparency, and this committee must also remain transparent. Nothing is heard in the meeting video if you do not speak into the mics.
To me, it sounds like very smart advice for us to take. So we don't overstep our bounds or, like I say, unintended consequences.
Seeing as this item was not on our agenda formally. Rob?
I would echo the sage advice of our senior staff, our senior member of our committee, and our director of planning.
We like to call him Dad.
Yeah. And that if you're going to serve another term, you won't be a junior, you'll be a sophomore.
So you need a motion and a second for the notice of motion? So we just need a move. Who would like to move that? Wolf wants to move it? Okay, Wolf is moving for the notice of motion. Okay, all right. So are there any other property reports that we need to take care of? Yes, Kathy.
Not exactly a report, but before we lose Jeremy to wherever it is, whatever exalted place he's choosing, rather than the wonderful city of Hamilton, could I please ask for a final update on the state of the gatehouse?
Certainly, through the chair to Kathy. Yeah, I had hoped I would have something here for you at this last meeting, but it's unfortunately a lot of the designation work kind of had to leave while it was simply me on staff. So that unfortunately hasn't been put forward. But I think what would be wise is to have a meeting maybe with myself and yourself and subsequent meetings with our new planner, Miranda, who's actually will be handling this file, to kind of hand off and let her know where it is and kind of what I suggest. I've made it clear before in terms of next steps. I think the best option is to move forward with building condition assessment, to look at the condition of the building and to fully explore the possibility of moving before that door shut. But clearly it's a tricky property with a property owner who's made it clear they're not in favor of designation. But I think that's a good idea. We should have a meeting, and hopefully in the new year there'll be some more movement on this.
Through the chair, thank you, Jeremy. Be very happy to do that before your departure, and if you and Brenda can come up with some suitable dates, I'll make myself available, because the longer we leave this, the more hypothetical this conversation is going to be. The place is going to fall down, so we need to move as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Any other property updates? Seeing none, we'll now move on just to any other business. So our next meeting is January 17th. January 17th, it's noon until 2. So maybe we'll just do some closing comments before we leave for the end of the year. So again, welcome to Miranda. Thank you for joining us as staff. Thank you to all of the staff for everything you've done for us all year long as we move into 2019. Want to extend well wishes to Jeremy on all of your future endeavors. You know we're going to miss you around here. You've done so much for the committee and a lot of hard work, so you will be missed. Thank you to all of our Heritage Committee members, and I want to wish you a happy holiday, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. And unfortunately, Chuck, we're going to be back for until this lady says we can't come back anymore.
I didn't mean it with a negative tone.
We saw the disappointment in your eye. You were excited about this being your last.
Yeah, it was more of a resignation tone.
So before, hi Jeremy.
Just through the chair, before we end, I wanted to also say a thank you to Asia, this is her second time here at the city, and she's done a lot of hard work. She's worked really hard for us, and she's really been a very huge help for us, especially through the transition. So thank you to Asia.
Thank you very much, Asia. Are you still back in the new year? No. Oh, are you done? Is this your last meeting, Asia? Oh, I didn't know that was your last. Well, I know you've been a big help when Chelsea was here, and you've been a big help to Jeremy, and you've been actually helping on one of our projects for the Places of Worship project. So thank you very much for all that work that you did on that. That really did help us out with that going forward. There's lots of goodies. Thank you to everyone that brought some sweet treats so we can have our Christmas gathering before we head off for the end of the year. May I have a motion to adjourn? David, Kathy, all in favor? Everybody put your hands up.